Morning. There are a couple technical glitches, so just make sure that everybody here has their phones off. But if anybody knows somebody who is trying to get on digitally, if you could text them if they're trying to do it, and make sure they go back to the original Shari Tzedek website and the link, the Cemetery Board YouTube site, and then they can log on from there. A new link has been generated. To begin today, I'd like Chazan Orzak to do. Yeah, very good.
מכתום לדוד שומרני אל כי חסיסי בך. אמרת לאדוני אדוני אתה טובעסי בלעך לקדושים אשר בארצנו וידירי כוכב סביבם. ירבו עצמי סומכם מהרו בלעשיך נזכה מידם ובלעשו את שמי סומל ספוסוי. Adonai menos chelki b'choi siato toi michoi roli. Chabolim noflu li banimim af nachalas shofro oloi. Aboreches Adonai yashe yotzoni af lelois yisuni chilyoisoi. Shivi si Adonai lenegdi somit ki mimini balemoit. לכן סומך ליבי ויוגל כבודי אף בשרי ישכון לבטח כי לא יתעזוב נפשי לשאול לא יסיתן חסידך לירוי שחס תוידיעני אורחיים סויבה סמוכויס אספונך נעימויס בימינך נצח.
In the Jewish tradition, the eulogy is a central part of we learn this from Avraham Avinu himself, who stopped everything to eulogize Sarah. From the beginning of the story, we see the Jews have understood that love and responsibility do not end with the passing of a loved one. This eulogy has two purposes. One is to acknowledge the goodness and the worth of Bernie, who still in tradition is still with us today. And the other is bechi, is to crying, and basically to give voice to grief, to acknowledge that his absence creates for his family and the community that it'll generate. To start off the eulogies today, we invite Rabbi Rosenblatt, who is speaking to us via Zoom.
Thank you, Rabbi Berger. So, Bernie passed very, very suddenly, and this took place on not an insignificant day on the Jewish calendar. That day happened to be the 9th of Tevet. And the reason this is a day of significance is because that is the yahrzeit of a very important, perhaps maybe one of the most important figures in all of Jewish history, and that is Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe. And Ezra is a very important figure in Jewish history because Ezra is the figure of rebirth. After the destruction of the temple, after the Babylonian exile, Ezra is the one who brings the children of Israel back to the land of Israel and rebuilds the temple, rebuilds the community there in Israel. And he's a figure of that rebirth. And to me, Bernie Bressler is just maybe one of the best examples I know of generations of baby boomers. Now, baby boomers mean something in the very broad sense of the culture. But in our world, in the Jewish world, baby boomers mean people who understood the destruction that happened at the Shoah and also were passionate about creating a traditional community here in North America, here in Canada. And for Bernie, he embodied values that I would say both personally and our community, they value at the highest level. He was someone who was committed to the pursuit of truth, knowledge, and academic excellence, but also at the same time, the preservation of Torah and of Judaism and of the Jewish community. And just one sort of story that was shared with me by Eric Schwartz. And Eric said that this story happened before he became friends with Brian. And he says that when he was first starting medical school, he was really overwhelmed by all of the pressures. And they say that sometimes that the beginning of medical school is learning to drink from a fire hose. That's how much knowledge you have to take in. And so he was very nervous because the high holidays were coming up, and he was going to have to miss anatomy lectures. And so he understood that Bernie Bressler was a big macher, was a very very accomplished member of the Department of Anatomy. And so these are Eric's words. 4 of us piled into his office at the end of the day and sought his counsel about whether or not we should go to lectures or to go to services on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. His face lit up, and we could see how pleased he was that we came in. He very quickly said that we should all be going to shul and not to be worried because we could get the notes afterwards. And then he offered to host a tutorial session for us after the holidays in case we needed it. I think about this every year in the weeks preceding Rosh Hashanah and always make sure to approach my students and residents to ensure that they know they can miss rotations for the holidays. The story sort of, to me, encapsulates this idea that you can both be an excellent Jew and an excellent doctor. That these two things never stand in conflict. They're really part and parcel of being the same person. And the Ezra figure it's such a perfect model for Bernie, because Ezra is this generation of rebuilders who bring Torah back from Babylon and reestablish it. In fact, the Torah reading that we have in synagogue is very much a product of Ezra. And in fact, the ceremony where we lift the Torah up so that everyone can see the letters, called Hagba, that's something that Ezra instituted. He essentially declares that the Torah should be read not just in the temple, but also in the marketplace. It needs to go to the people. And the Ramban, Nachmandi, says about this, it says, it's a play on words. There's a curse written in the Torah. Cursed be the one who does not uphold the words of the Torah. But he flips it around and says, Baruch Asher Yakim et Divrei HaTorah Hazot. Blessed is the one who stands up these words of the Torah. And I think about those words, and I think about people needing to bring Torah to far off places. And we in Vancouver, we like to think that we're far off. But everybody from Vancouver who drives to Richmond always gets lost because we don't know Richmond, which means that Richmond must be further off than Vancouver. And Bernie sort of establishing Eitz Chaim, recruiting Rabbi Fegelstock, alternating being president of Eitz Chaim with Basil Conner. He was literally Baruch Asher Yakim et Divrei HaTorah Hazot. You could see that's who he was. He was someone who wanted to make sure that the Torah continued to be read, continued to have a presence, that Yiddishkeit, that education, that Torah reading took place. I know for a fact that he taught the Conner boys to read the Torah, and I'm sure that he taught many others. I was privileged to know Bernie, though, more in the Sharet Tzedek context than the Eitz Chaim context. And I think there was never a moment that was happier for Bernie than when he was able to sit in shul and there were 3 generations of Bresslers sitting there together. And even as Bernie declined over the years, you can tell sometimes what is deepest and what is most deeply ingrained in a person when you as the layers start to peel off and what remains underneath. And so, interestingly, that Ezra is considered of Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. He's men of the Great Assembly. And these men of the Great Assembly were the establishers of our Siddur. And so when I say what is deepest down in Bernie's personality, so Bernie was never more present, more found. As if when he was anchored with that Siddur, Bernie was back to his old self. Bernie was able to be there, fully present. He knew exactly what to do. The words of the Siddur and the Tefillot were deep, deep, deep into who Bernie was. And our tradition refers to Ezra as Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, which we might translate as Ezra the scholar. And Bernie was exactly that. He was a mentor to many people. Sandra mentioned the other day that at the Emeritus Society there are so many stories of Bernie's mentorship. But I learned of this several years ago. We were running a networking event trying to help people find jobs. And Jonathan Coleman was generous enough to make his offices available for that event. And I remember he started off speaking about his own story. And I didn't know this, but as soon as Jonathan started speaking, he talked about his first days getting started and how he was looking to recruit biotech companies. And he said that he would not have been where he is were it not for the mentorship that Bernie offered him when he was first starting out. But Sandra confirmed that it wasn't just Jonathan Colner. There were many people, and anybody who asked for his help would very willingly receive it, that he was just someone who mentored to so many. And Bernie was willing to give his skills to all of his passion projects. Ezra is the scribe, Ezra HaSofer, is understood as being responsible for what we call Shivat Zion, the return to Zion. And Bernie was there. I remember talking to him about the Canada-Israel partnerships and how he could help foster connections. He was involved in various ways, mentoring people, creating connections, fostering research, fostering collaboration. And his Zionism is not something which only exists in those perhaps committee settings. Anybody who knows his family knows that their deep commitment to Israel, and I would say that I know personally that the legacy continues, and the attempt to create partnerships across the continent are very much part of what the Bressler family is doing, whether it's bringing fellows into Vancouver or whether it's creating ways for Vancouver and Israel to collaborate in medicine. These are all things which I see very much as legacies of Bernie. And the last thing that I just want to say is that Ezra was also a champion of the family. And I discovered where Bernie's true strength lied. There was one year where Manischewitz had put out a kosher wine that wasn't kosher for Passover. And Bernie and I were running around all the liquor stores together trying to find the kosher wine, the kosher Passover certified wine. And first of all, it taught me about how important these fixtures of Torah and of continuity were to him. But also, I understood right there that the source of all of Bernie's strength was Sandra. And that all of the values that he had and all the things that they created together were very much because of the strength that she gave him. And her commitment to him has been absolutely outstanding and superlative and just a beautiful thing to see. And I should just also say that nothing made them happier or made Bernie happier than when Robbie was in town. And I know that they so treasured the visit a month ago with Sophie. And it's always hard to have a child who moves away. I know that because I've done that to my parents. But it was just, you could tell that was That was just part of who Bernie was. And I would just, last but not least, just say that to me, sometimes coming and delivering these eulogies, you realize about the examples that people give to you. And to me, just that the generation of people who have such a deep connection to both their sense of Torah and Judaism and their sense of academic excellence and pursuit of truth. That's just such an important combination. It seems to me that is the very root of what we hope to be. And Bernie was just the shining example of what that was to me, and I'm sure to many others as well. I wish everyone, the entire family, comfort. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there. Bernie was an incredibly special person to me and has left our community a treasure of a family.
Thank you, Rabbi. Next up, we'd like to invite Brian to say some words about his father.
My brother and I certainly inherited my dad's sensitivity, and any sort of speaking like this was always a challenge for my dad. He never got through anything that meant so much to him without tears, and we inherited that, but we're going to do our best. So my entire family knows which Torah portion is my dad's. It's an issue that comes up every year, and I remind them every year about it. It's Vayechi. That's his Torah. That's his bar mitzvah portion, the last parsha of Bereshit. This Shabbat, the Torah portion is Vayechi. It's an important time in the Torah. It's Yaakov. It's Jacob's final moment. At that final moment, one would think about the legacy that a great person like Jacob left the world. The emphasis in the Torah was not on what he accomplished, and obviously he accomplished so much, but it was centered around the blessings that he gave to his children. That's Jacob's legacy. That's what we learned, his children. And part of it, I believe, he also gave blessing to some of his grandchildren at the time as well. So I'm going to share with you many thoughts about my dad, and I'm going to certainly highlight his accomplishments, but I'm going to start and I'm going to end my eulogy by emphasizing his legacy. And that is, without a doubt, his children and his grandchildren, Elisa, Kaylee, Joshua, Sophie, Mia, and Jesse. My dad was born in Winnipeg. He moved to Montreal in grade school, where he would spend summers with his Zeta Velvel, working at one of the first kosher butchers in the north end of Winnipeg on Selkirk Street. A side note that's relevant because my dad loved the fact and took every opportunity to tell us how much he loved the name of the street we live on in Vancouver, Selkirk. It just was something that he couldn't get over. He loved it. Now, as he was growing up in high school, and I think Phil and perhaps others here would recall, I think without a doubt, in hearing stories last night from my aunt, and wow, stories I did not know about him, he was much more popular than Robbie and I were in high school. Truly, Outremont was his hood. He really flourished in that. From leading the teen minyan at the Young Israel, I guess, of Outremont, of Montreal, to holding what I have always heard to be epic socials in his basement. That's what they were called. I have heard that if you were with him, you were going to have a fun time. He really captured that energy, and everyone wanted to receive that energy. And then he started his postgraduate training. So his graduate training. He did his Bachelor's of Science from Sir George Williams University, which is now called Concordia. Beyond his school, though, he was a fantastic offensive lineman, such that the Montreal Alouettes, which was the CFL football team, asked him to try out at his training camp. It was a great opportunity until he told his father, who reminded him that his path in this life was not going to include professional football. That didn't go forward. So instead, he pivoted and he went on to receive his Master's of Science in Anatomy in 1968 and his PhD in Physiology in 1972 from the University of Manitoba. And then he completed his postdoc studies in neuroscience at McMaster University. His first job after he finished his postgraduate training was in Saskatoon. I was born in Saskatoon, but thanks to the competition of the weather versus my mom and that conflict, that experience did not last long. So he moved to Vancouver in 1976. His career at UBC was, I'm not going to say unprecedented, but was an unbelievable success. He was the head of the anatomy department. He was the Associate Dean, Research and Graduate Studies for the Faculty of Medicine. And then later he became the Vice President of Research at UBC. And in that role, in his final role, amongst many things he did, he was instrumental in growing something called, which is a very important part of the University Industry Liaison Office, which really became and has been a model in the world in how you combine the development and the management of technology transfer and biotechnical spin-offs from a university. For this and other accomplishments in the area of commercialization of inventions, he was recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Life Sciences BC. After that, my dad went on to become the Vice President Research at Vancouver Coastal Health and the Executive Director of the VCH Research Institute. He oversaw the creation of the Vancouver Coastal Health Research Institute, which is one of the top 5 research organizations in our country. I have received countless emails and texts over the last few days from prominent physicians in our province who have told me time and time again how instrumental my dad's mentorship and support was for them to be able to accomplish what they did. And that was all he cared about. It was never about him. It was about making sure that his colleagues would have the wherewithal and the ability to succeed. It was an unbelievable dedication he had to people around him. Now, his day job as a researcher was equally impressive. And to be honest, this part of it, I didn't realize until recently. So his research career focused on the understanding of skeletal muscle contractions. Not a lot was known at the time before he went into this field. And this is what I didn't realize until recently, that his PhD thesis was published in Nature. Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world. That helped me because the B. Bressler, when you search PubMed, really got me kickstarted in my academic career. And there were a few instances that I would remember when I would give talks in the world where how that would work is a moderator would briefly introduce the speaker and go over their accomplishments. And I recall specifically a few times when I was giving talks in Europe that they would specifically state my impressive publication record. And I knew exactly where that came from. And I said, thank you. Though titles are important, his true job satisfaction, without a doubt, came from helping his colleagues, which I've already mentioned, with research opportunities, then also advocating physicians in the academic arena. And I believe what he took most pride in was training physicians in our province. And this started even before medical school. as many physicians who are now at the top of their field relied on their advice and mentorship that my dad gave them during the early stages of their medical training. As was mentioned by Rabbi Rosenblatt, he advocated for Jewish medical students, ensuring they felt comfortable practicing our religion in their way without interfering with their studies. And since I've started my career in Vancouver, very short time is between seeing someone else that I hear about how instrumental these physicians' path was because of my dad's ability to teach them or the mentorship they provided. And he has touched so many healthcare professionals in our province. This whole issue of advocating for the ability to practice Judaism in the way students wanted to and not interfere with their training, I have thought a lot about over these last 2 years. And there were many things that we suffered from my dad's illness of dementia. But I was so thankful to Hashem that my dad was not aware of the acceptance we're now seeing of anti-Semitism at UBC. I can't tell you how, but I can promise you, if this was occurring during his time, the response to this cruel discrimination would have been very different and would be very different. My dad was very rich. In Pirkei Avot, we learn who is rich, one who is happy with their portion. And this truly could not have explained my dad's approach to this world better. He was so happy and content with what he had. If his family and friends were present, things could not be better. I will speak more about family later, but I truly must acknowledge the legendary group of friends that meant the world to him, who were more recently there for my mom during these challenging times. There is no question in my mind that a large part of my strong devotion to Judaism stems from those many Shabbat meals, Seders, and other Yom Tov meals we shared with so many friends growing up. It was during these times that I noticed my dad beaming with joy. As the other place the rabbi mentioned where my dad was happiest was at shul. His father told him that shul should be your second home. For my grandfather, he took that next level as he had an extravagant shikar club, so much that for when he passed away, there is a plaque outside the room where he would host that shikar club. My dad's home was shul as well. When we moved to Saskatoon, to Richmond, most of us are already aware of the dedication our families and others had to building an Orthodox synagogue, around which our lives were truly centered. I am blessed to have witnessed the devotion he gave to Eitz Chaim. Though I am sure there are amazing places to daven in Gan Eden. If there aren't, you can bet along with others, including Basil, they're working on that shortly. My dad, the Zionist, truthfully, that wasn't, when I was young, the state of Israel didn't come up very much in conversation. My dad had hesitations about traveling to Israel until he did. And then, wow, did that ever change? His first trip to Israel was when he really had no excuse not to go. Robbie was on the Louis Israel trip, and I was spending the summer taking a course at Hebrew University before traveling afterward. From the moment he stepped foot in Israel, he fell in love. He fell in love. He loved every aspect of the country, including the cab drivers. And without a doubt, the highlight of his trip, I think probably the highlight of many of our trip, was the moment that he met his soon-to-be daughter-in-law at the Planet Hollywood on the beach in Tel Aviv. After that experience, as the rabbi alluded to, he developed a new passion that he now had to focus in on, and that was Israel. He wanted to go as often as possible and to help his homeland in everywhere he could. And as was alluded to, one very impactful way he did so was by serving on the board of the Canada-Israel Industrial Research Development Foundation. This role provided grants from both countries for both countries to support collaboration between scientists and the biotech industry. My dad was warm and kind. He generally cared about those he worked with, his friends in the community. He certainly had that Winnipeg trait of offering a warm interaction to anyone he encountered. And to be honest, this became more noticeable and somewhat of a challenge as his dementia began to take away some of his inhibitions. Going out with him became much more interesting, as a quick errand would turn into a lengthy get-to-know-your-neighbor event. It was an issue that became challenging to navigate as his dementia took hold of him. My dad was determined to learn more about the world, and that was obvious by his research career, but it extended far beyond that. When I lived at home, our dinner conversations regularly focused on world events and politics. The morning drive, and Matthew reminded me of this, from Richmond to VTT, always included listening to the CBC News, always. The evening ended with my parents, half asleep, watching the National. So kids, you can thank Zeta in part for our intriguing dinner conversations and also my obsession with listening to the Times of Israel on our morning commute. My dad loved his family. That may seem obvious, but truly, this was a priority and a source of enjoyment in his life, was spending time with both his and my mom's extended family. There was no question in my mind that his love of Winnipeg was almost entirely dependent on the family who lived there. Siblings, sisters and brother-in-laws, cousins in Vancouver, nieces and nephews from Montreal, cousins from Toronto and LA, from all over North America. This is where were the people that brought him joy. He felt fortunate to have the means to travel and spend time with them wherever he could. Though I've already discussed many passions of my dad, I confidently believe everyone who met him knew his true love, his Sandra. From the moment he asked her to hold his watch at the Camp B'nai B'rith counselor basketball game to his last conscious moments earlier this week, his attention was always on my mom. They had breakfast together, dinner together. They fell asleep watching the news together, and they went upstairs to bed together every night. That was their routine, and it couldn't have been more perfect. Mom, you and Dad, you set the ceiling for what a loving, caring marriage can be. He now loves you and protects you in a different way, but we will always remember how he devoted his life to you. Back to my dad's legacy. And some of them are sitting in the front row. Let me start with Robbie and me. Dad, you showed us what it means to be a humble, sensitive, caring, and responsible father. You showed us how important it is to give back to our community with whatever means we have, especially our time. You lived a life of strong Jewish morals and values, and we aim to come somewhere close to what you've accomplished. Though I don't know this, I think Hashem would have been satisfied with that. But Dad, your legacy didn't end with us. Your grandchildren are showing their communities and their families who they come from. Elisa, with your confidence and your charisma. Kaylee, with your immense caring for others and humility. Josh, or as he would call you, the Josh man, with his deep sensitivity and passion for Judaism. Dad, you would have been so proud of Sophie as she embraced Judaism, as evident in her bat mitzvah and her desire to attend chat the Jewish high school next year. And you know that Robbie and Dade are committed to ensuring Mia and Jesse understand the values you hold dear and will follow your lead. All your grandchildren have inherited your traits. I know they have made you proud. And I promise you, Dad, that what you left us will form a foundation that will impact the world in a way that continues to make you proud. Dad, I know from those around you, just as always, you are a joy to be with. However, before I end, we must thank from the deepest of our hearts and on behalf of our family, Lita and your other caregivers. These past few years were extremely hard, but Hashem truly blessed us by bringing Lita into our lives. Lita, you are a very special person.
I'm not sure I'm going to get through this without my voice breaking, but I'm going to try. And I've included some lighter moments to help keep it together. Like my brother, I keep coming back to Parshat Vayikra, my dad's bar mitzvah portion, and how Jacob's greatest legacy was his children and grandchildren. That's where I want to start too, with the family my dad built, cherished, and set such a high example for. My brother said earlier, my dad lived a life centered on what truly mattered. He never chased possessions for his own sake. Wealth to him had purpose, supporting the Jewish community, giving Brian and me the best education possible, and being present for family simchas, no matter where they were across the world. In fact, he didn't buy his first new car until his 50s. His explanation to Brian and I was always the same. A car's only job is to get you from point A to point B. That's my dad. Practical, purposeful, and completely uninterested in status symbols. Growing up, Brian and I were incredibly lucky to have a father who showed up for everything. He coached my Richmond Tigers flag football team, and yes, made his 9-year-old son, me, the quarterback. Together, we even invented our own set of hand signals so he could call plays into me from the sidelines. I still smile thinking about half-back sweep left with a fake. We spent hours designing. It almost worked perfectly until the Richmond Raiders figured it out in the championship game, but it was a good run. At home, he pulled Brian and I into lots of projects, cutting the grass, painting the fence, building furniture, troubleshooting computers. Brian, being the smarter one, always seemed to vanish just as the sukkah needed assembling. Usually he was on the phone with Matthew. That left me as my dad's steady helper. And honestly, I loved every minute of it. Those hours weren't really about the task. They were about being side by side with him. Through that time, he taught me the value of hard work, the feeling of accomplishment, and most importantly, of taking a well-earned nap afterwards. My dad set the bar incredibly high, not through pressure or expectations, but through the graceful, purposeful way he lived. He showed us what a truly successful life looks like, one filled with integrity, balance, unwavering commitment to family, community, and his colleagues, and having a deep, lasting impact on everyone he met. Above all, he showed us how to love and support your spouse. The devotion he showed our mom was truly exceptional. He loved her with all his heart, and nothing felt complete without her. My mom was his best friend, his constant companion, and the very center of his world. Their bond was beautiful, enduring examples of what a loving marriage can be. Watching him juggle it all with such grace taught Brian and me, and later his grandchildren, what it truly meant to build a meaningful life. And he didn't just raise the bar, he showed us how to reach it and why it's worth every effort. Elisa, Kaylee, Josh, Sophie, Mia, Jesse already carry so much warmth, conviction, and kindness. Together, we promise to keep raising it, living with the same love, leadership, and commitment he modeled every single day. He was also an incredibly supportive father. One memory that lives vividly with me happened on a vacation in Kelowna when I was 3. We were staying at the Mission Park Inn for 10 days, surrounded by so many of the families who are here today. For 9 straight days, I refused to go in the water with water rings. Then on the very last night, I announced, I'm ready. I put them on and I jumped in. My dad leaped up, threw his bathing suit on backwards, and dove right in after me. The pride on his face is something I'll carry forever. He was always proud of me and Brian, proud of our steps forward, big and small. I couldn't have asked for a more supportive and loving father. Professionally, I got to see my dad in action during a pivotal time in my own life. After university, when I wasn't sure what direction to take, he brought me in to help on projects at VGH Research Institute. I was so proud watching how he conducted himself, driven, respected, courteous, caring, and always a man of his word. Seeing him work closely with Rick Hansen, someone we grew up as seeing as a national hero, and earn that deep mutual respect said everything about the leader my dad was. My dad went on to be the chairman of the Rick Hansen Institute for Spinal Cord Research for 7 years. My dad lived to help others, as my brother mentioned, and he showed us that helping wasn't a burden. It was a privilege, a chance to make someone's life better. That lesson is still guiding me every day. He took pride in his convictions and zero patience for bigotry or negativity. He held strong opinions, though famously, a few of them softened over time. Skiing, there'll be no skiing in this house, he proclaimed. Months later, he's taking lessons, and we're all skiing together as a family. I'm never renting from Budget Rent-A-Car again. Another firm stance until it wasn't. Politically, he moved from being a great admirer of Pierre Trudeau to proudly joining the Conservative Party of Canada. He started with certainty, but he always listened. And when he saw merit in another view, he wasn't afraid of change. That rare combination, deep conviction paired with real openness, was such a big part of who he was. The last few years have been heartbreaking. To have him physically present, yet slowly slipping away from the man he had always been, was difficult. And yet, even as the disease advanced, there were things that pierced through and reminded me exactly of who he was. Every morning, without fail, he insisted on doing 2 things. First, putting on his kippah. Second, putting a pen in his shirt pocket. On the day he left us, he once again did both and had both with him when he passed. To me, those 2 simple acts were his soul shining through until the very end. The kippah was his faith, his principles, a life built on kindness, selflessness, and purpose. Even when he could no longer do mitzvahs the way he once did, the desire to live with that intention never left him. And the pen, that was my dad as a man of action. He never coasted. Every day he woke up ready, from helping a medical student, building an Orthodox shul in Richmond, being the 10th for a minyan when needed, joining a community board, promoting medical research, and offering guidance and support to his family. He was always prepared, always committed. This is who my dad was through everything. These aspects never left him. Lastly, On behalf of my family, I want to express our deepest gratitude for all the family and friends gathered here today. My parents arrived in Richmond in 1976, knowing no one. They built something extraordinary, a circle of friends who truly became our family. From summer vacations in Kelowna with groups of friends, to Florida trips with the Rosses, to Seders with the Callners, and Yontubs with the Halperns and Gutmans, and so many others. You have shared our simchas, celebrated our joys, and stood by us in moments like this. Words fall short of expressing how fortunate and blessed we feel to have you and your unwavering support through the years. Thank you for being the community that made our family's life so rich and meaningful.
Thank you. To learn more about Bernie as a grandfather, we're going to invite the grandkids to come up and speak.
My Zeta Bernie was an exemplary man, husband, father, and grandfather. He was a mensch in the truest meaning of the word. He was an extraordinary teacher, educating thousands of medical students at UBC, University of Saskatchewan, and some of the most esteemed medical institutions across Canada. And like any good teacher, there was nothing more he loved than embarking lessons upon those closest to him, particularly his grandchildren. The very first lesson he taught me was to take bites. I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and I was getting a little too excited about eating whatever delicious meal Baba Sandra had put on the table. Worried I might choke, Zeta implored me to take bites. This became a mantra my parents would repeat to me, and I'd repeat to myself as a kid, perhaps jokingly, or perhaps when Baba Sandra's cooking was just too good to slow down. But now as I've grown, I see the first lesson my Zeta taught me, not just about how to digest food, but about taking life's biggest challenges in bites. To not let thoughts of the big scary future consume you, but to appreciate and honor small doses of what matters most. It's easy to get caught up in ambitions, and like my Zeta, I have many of them. But no matter what my Zeta achieved, and his achievements were numerous, his commitment to his family never wavered. There was nothing that brought out his signature, charming smile more than when we were all together. Kaylee, Josh, and I had the most fun when we'd stay at Bubba and Zeta's house in Richmond. Zeta loved to dance with us in the kitchen, sing along to the Beatles and old school rock and roll in the car, and watch the Canucks with the Josh Man. The weekends we'd spent at their house when my parents were away were full of laughter and play. I'll never forget when he discovered the whoopee cushion and the howling laugh he let out when we placed one under Bubba's chair. My mom, my sister, and I had the honor of being called his sweethearts, or his beautiful young ladies. He especially loved to dance with his sweethearts, taking us by the hand, holding us close, and just getting lost in the music. For every simcha in the coming years, when we dance, I will always think of being my Zeta sweetheart. But the ultimate sweetheart, of course, was my Baba Sandra. The love and adoration he had for her was truly one of a kind. She was everything to him, and you could see it in his eyes every time she so much as picked up the phone, and even as he got sick. The way he loved her has set the standard of how the rest of my family loves each other, and how we give and receive love from others. Baba and Zeta, thank you for showing me what true love and partnership looks like. Being by his side as his cognition declined was challenging, no doubt. But what remained was his friendliness, his natural drive to make friends wherever he went, and of course, his smile. I will miss seeing his smile for the rest of my life. While he was in the Louis Brier, I got to visit him many times on my trips home from university in Ontario and grad school in Boston. Just a few weeks ago, I had to take an unexpected trip home, and I got to visit my Zeta for what I didn't know would be the last time. My parents, our dog Cody, and I met him in the Louis Briar. We ate souf gagnotte, sang Hanukkah songs, and just existed together. When it was time to go, I said to him, "I'm not going to see you for a very long time, but I love you very, very much." Though throughout the visit he had struggled to communicate, I could tell, in some way, he had registered what I said, and he said to me, "I love you too." What a blessing that those were the last words I'd ever hear from him. Zeta, I will carry you and all the lessons you taught me in my heart forever. Your legacy lives on with your grandchildren, and we promise to make you proud and to savor the bite-sized moments in life. I will miss you forever, and I love you dearly.
The loss of my Zeta Bernie has left a heartbreak that is difficult to put into words. He was truly an extraordinary man, a constant source of warmth and unconditional love. Growing up, whenever I saw him, he would ask for a hug with two hands. That was his way. To him, love was something you gave fully, never rushed. The last time I saw my Zeta is a moment I keep returning to. I had come home for just a couple of days and made sure to visit him at the Louis Briar. If you know me, you know one of my favorite things to do with people is to go through my camera roll, and Zeta Bernie was always the best audience. I sat with him in his room, scrolling through photos, giving him updates on what I've been up to. When I showed him a picture of me in my scrubs, he looked at it and said, "That is wonderful, darling." As many of you know, my Zeta was a professor who taught medical students at UBC. One of the hardest parts of watching his cognitive decline was not being able to fully share my experiences with him as I become a nurse. To really connect with him over that shared world of caring for others. My Zeta was empathetic, deeply compassionate, and endlessly kind, qualities he taught me to bring into my nursing practice. Hearing him say those words in that moment meant so much to me, as I truly did feel his pride and love. When it was time to leave, he walked me to the front entrance to say goodbye. Even though my name was sometimes hard for him to remember, I knew without question that he knew I mattered. I went in for a hug with two hands, and I had a gut feeling that that moment was important. Now I understand why it felt that way. Some of my most cherished memories with my Zeta are the simple ones. I always loved staying over at my Bubba and Zeta's house when my parents were out of town. My Bubba and I would bake chocolate chip pancakes, sugar cookies, or Hamantaschens, and always made sure Zeta was the very first to taste them. I will never forget the smile on his face in those moments. He loved our traditions. Bowling nights in Richmond, followed by dinners at the old spaghetti factory. We would sing in the car, and he was endlessly impressed that I knew all the lyrics to every song on the radio. And when he tried to switch to his music, I let out an exaggerated fake yawn until he laughed and changed it back. Those moments were filled with so much joy. I will forever miss his voice leading Friday night Kiddush, guiding Passover Seders, and sprinkling Yiddish into conversation. One of his favorite phrases was a "be gesund," which translates to "as long as you're healthy." I like to think of this as a quiet reminder from him to focus on gratitude. Even as Alzheimer's made some days harder, a "be gesund" was his constant refrain. Even as his memory deteriorated, it was a phase he held on to, which goes to show that his number one priority in life was the health and happiness of his family. My Zeta accomplished so much in his life, academically, professionally, and personally, but above all else, he valued family. And nowhere was that more evident than in the way he loved my Bubba. The way my Zeta looked at my grandmother is something I will never forget. Even as his health declined, that love never wavered. You could see it in his eyes whenever she entered the room. They are my greatest role models. I feel incredibly grateful to have grown up with 4 amazing grandparents. My Zeta Robert, my mom's father, passed away 7 years ago, and I find comfort in imagining my Zetas together now. Zeta Bernie taught me to be warm. He taught me how to be empathetic. He taught me how to love fully and intentionally. Through his actions, he showed me that the smallest moment, like a shared laugh or a hug with 2 hands, can form the strongest memories. Zeta Bernie, I will love you forever. Thank you for your love and lessons. I will carry them with me always.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for all being here today to remember my Zeta Bernie. I'm my Zeta's 3rd oldest grandchild, but more well known as the best grandchild. My Zeta Bernie was such a role model to both me and my sisters. He was the nicest and most friendliest man you would ever meet. He's loved by every single person and lit up the room each day by his amazing smile. Zeta was always our biggest supporter. He came and cheered me on during my soccer and baseball games growing up, and constantly showed his love through it. Zeta was the best golfer out there. There was nothing I loved more than being out there with him and my Bubba and playing around with golf, than going for dinner at the Richmond Country Club and listening to old rock and roll music on the ride home. I cherished the Canucks games he used to take me to, and would always miss every little key thrown in the pool when playing Find the Key in Florida during our family vacation in Century Village. Heaven on earth. The most special memories with my Zeta are going to shul with him and my dad. We would sit 3 generations all together, and would sit right next to him and follow the Torah readings with his finger. From our Shabbat dinners to our Passover Seders in Florida, Judaism was so important to my Zeta, and is such a strong reason why I value it so much today. He had so much passion for the things he loved, through his endless stories as a UBC professor, to teaching my dad and uncle the bar mitzvah portions. When he loved something, he truly loved it with every bone in his body. My Zeta was the most affectionate and big-hearted person in the world. The way he loved my Bubba, even to the very end, was out of this world. Through his awful Alzheimer's disease, he never forgot who she was and never stopped caring and loving for her. They will forever be the most perfect couple in my eyes. He loved my dad so much and taught him how to be the best father in the world. He took in my mom like one of his daughters and treated her exceptionally and loved her unimaginably. And he loved me and my sisters to bits and pieces. He was the best grandfather any of us could ever ask for. It was such a blessing to visit my Zeta every Saturday at the Louis Bar and spend such quality time with him over this time there. Every time I would leave, he would always give me the biggest hug or high five, with the biggest and warmest smile on his face, and those moments I would never forget. Even through his memory loss, if you ever asked him about the Josh man, he would always know who you were talking about. Even if he wasn't able to always express it, he never forgot his deep, loving, and special connection with me, and his love has continued to show to my sisters and me over the years. I will forever be your Josh man. Zeta, you will always be a hero to me. I will forever miss you, and I will continue to carry out the lessons and memories we have over the years. I will forever love you and have you in my heart. I love you, Zeta.
Thank you all for sharing those beautiful memories of your grandfather. Next, I'd like to invite Rabbi Fagelstock to come speak.
just learned today that his favorite parsha is Parshas Vayechi. And it's no coincidence that the parsha this week really encapsulates a lot of Bernie's life. Starting off with, it says, V'chi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. Rabbis tell us that was the best 17 years of his life, because 17 is the gematria Tov. And one would ask the question, that here is Jacob leaving Israel, going to Mitzrayim, should be his best 17 years? And then, when he meets his grandchildren, Ephraim and Manasseh, what does he say? That the rest of the Jewish world and the rest of the eternity of the Jewish people, when you bless your child Friday night, what do you say? Yisimcha lehim k'Ephraim u'k'Manasseh. Make them like Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born where? In Egypt. Not any of the other 12 tribes. So I'd like to start with, actually, when I first met Bernie. I met him actually before I came out to Vancouver. I used to be very close friends with Barry, and through Barry, I knew your Zeta. And Barry had this habit every Friday night to drive me home from shul, which is only 2 blocks, to my home. But he did a detour. He'll go pick up his father first, and he'll pick up. It was a half hour later I got there 2 blocks away from my house. But this way I had the great merit of meeting your Zeta and talking to your Zeta. And I remember your Zeta saying one of his greatest accomplishments that he felt he has done was being one of the founders of the Beth Israel Synagogue in Côte St. Luc. And he was one, I still remember the first building, and every time I used to see him after, he used to tell me how it was expanding. Why did I tell that story? Because when Bernie and Sandra and the Kellners came out to Richmond, there was a dilemma. There wasn't an Orthodox shul. And here is his son creating the Eitz Chaim, which went through a lot of challenges to actually get established. But then after that, he approached me in 1986. I was at that time a shliach in Chabad house with Rabbi Weinberg, and he wanted me to come to Richmond. To me, it was like, there's no way. But he insisted. We wrote to the Rebbe. To make the long story short, I ended up being, I think, the first full-time rabbi of Eitz Chaim. Thank you to your dad. Because he was the one who had both worked with Rabbi Weinberg and myself to make it happen. And he insisted. It took, I think, 6 months to a year till it actually actualized. But his idea was that even though he's out here sort of, which in those days, in the 80s, were sort of the Mitzrayim compared to Israel or New York, that didn't stop him. He made sure to establish Yiddishkeit, Torah, and so on and so forth. A few other lessons they have learned from him was, I don't remember what year Dr. Bressler, your bar mitzvah was in the 80s, Mr. Rabbi, right? 88. So I became the rabbi in 86. You're one of the first groups of bar mitzvah boys. And I remember your dad coming to me and telling me something which stayed with me for the rest of my life. And he said to me the following: teaching a child for a bar mitzvah is not the objective. The objective is to make them comfortable in the shul. So therefore, I want you to cover with them discussions about basic Judaism. Still remember some of the discussions we had, you and Zach and others that we had in that bar mitzvah class. But his objective was really, really to make sure that his children feel comfortable in the shul. And since then, all the years I've taught bar mitzvah boys, I said, let's not concentrate on the aliyah and the haftarah, the speech. Let's concentrate, could you open up a siddur? And your father said to me, if a child feels comfortable in a shul, he'd go anywhere around the world and feel at home. See, he saw that as a very essential part. Another personal thing is, it was the first Pesach I was at Eitz Chaim. And we have the tradition, Pesach, Chabad has the tradition, we say Hallel on the first night of Pesach. Ashkenaz did not have, and I didn't know what to do. Of course, I wasn't going to change the nusach of the shul. But I decided, after services, I'll stay behind, and I'll say Hallel. Comes after Shemona Esrei, your father gives a patch on the table, we're saying Hallel. So I said, we're an Ashkenaz synagogue. Says, my father said Hallel, and we're going to say Hallel. I still remember that. But definitely he was devoted of building Yiddishkeit, as everyone said. But I want to leave you with a thought. That we find something very strange in this week's parsha, his favorite parsha. When the Torah describes Jacob's death, you won't find the words that he died. It says, V'yesav el Amma, he was gathered to his people. So the Talmud asks this question. Talmud brings a famous quote, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Yaakov Avinu never died. And the Gemara asks the question, what do you mean never died? They said what they did with his body, they brought him to Israel. And the Talmud answers the question, Ma zari b'chayim avhu b'chayim. His children are alive, so he's also alive. The legacy he left is his life, and therefore, really, when his passing is v'yesef el amay, the people around him realize that the great accomplishments your father has done. And I remember him from the early years of giving me tours of UBC anatomy department and showing me the eyes and everything else, which he was so proud, and showing me what the students were doing, and his devotion to UBC. Really, he used to share with me the different advancements, accomplishments, and later on to VGH, and later on he used to talk to me about the initiative of, I think he was one of the people who were very essential in creating the Israeli Canada Alliance and so on and so forth. He was a man who lived not only for his family, but he lived for the community. And therefore his loss is not only a personal loss, it's really a loss for our own community, because Torah in Vancouver wouldn't have been today where it is without your dad. He definitely had a tremendous contribution in so many different ways. Always supported any Torah initiative and always felt strength. But the world as a whole will miss his contribution and his leadership and his example of an exceptional person that he was. I'll let you just conclude that Mazarei B'chai, that not only he has students who are alive, people who he helped, but literally children and grandchildren who are alive, who enjoy Yiddishkeit, is something which is so essential to him. Definitely his spirit will be kept alive in our hearts, in my hearts, and his neshama shall only go from one level to the other. Take nafshi tzrura b'tzur ha'chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi. As has been brought up several times here, the his bar mitzvah parsha, and the parsha that he is niftar is Parshas Vayechi. And Vayechi, the irony of Vayechi is that it talks about, and this is the life, and it's the parsha where he actually passes away. It teaches something I think quite profound and deep to me, is that a life is not defined when it ends. We don't just say, okay, at this point, ad kan, up till here. And I think we've seen with each of the speeches, each of the eulogies, that his life has had an impact greater than the moment we're at right now. And his dreams will live on, his memories will live on, his actions will live on, the love will be passed on through each one of us here today. And that in that way, Bernie is still very much with us and will continue to develop this community, both Jewishly, it'll continue it interpersonally with, I think, everybody who has taken time from their vacation to come and visit here today. With that in mind, we will conclude the service with Kamel Rachamim by Kent Orza. Please rise.
El Mole Rachamim, Shoichein Bamroimim, Hamtsei Menuchonechoino, Tachas Kanfei Ashechino, B'malois Kedoshim Utoirim, Kezoyam Orakiam Azirim, Esni Yishmas, Binyamin Aaron ben Yisrael Halevi, Sheholach Leyoel Lamoi, Biganei Edete Menuchosoi, Lachein Balorachamim, Yastireyu Besise Kenafov, Leyoel Lamim. V'Yitzroi Rachayim es nishmosoi, Adonai hu nachalosoi, V'Yanuach b'shalom al mishkovoi, V'noimar Amen.
Please be seated. We are now going to escort Bernie to his resting place. If there's somebody who needs assistance in that, there's an electric cart outside, and we're making the trip up there. If I can call the pallbearers forward to lead us.